My parents refused to pay for my college but secretly funded my sister's life. Until Grandpa found out, and all changed in a way they never saw coming. I'm Ellie, a 21-year-old female, and I've got some family drama to unload. For context, I recently graduated college, but my journey wasn't easy. It all started when I was 18, and my parents pulled a stunt. Let me break it down for you. It was the summer after high school. I was excited about starting community college in the fall. I picked a school close to home because, let's be real, college is expensive, and commuting seemed like the smart choice. Plus, I had some savings from my part-time cafe job, and I was relying on my parents' support to get through this, so I thought I'd be okay. One evening, my mom and dad sat me down at the kitchen table. I figured it was going to be one of those typical, "we're so proud of you" chats, but nope. Instead, I got the "you're an adult now" speech. You know the one, "it's time to be independent. You need to learn the value of money, blah blah blah." Then my mom hit me with, "We've decided we won't be paying for your college. You'll need to figure it out on your own." Just like that, my stomach dropped. It wasn't like I expected them to pay for everything, but not a single dime, no help with tuition, books, or even gas for commuting. That felt like a slap in the face. But wait, it gets better. My dad, who's usually the quiet one, said, "If you want to live here, you'll need to start paying rent and your own groceries. It's only fair." I just sat there thinking, what the hell? I mean, I was still in my childhood bedroom, sleeping under posters from middle school, and now they wanted rent from me on top of everything else? To give you some background, my parents aren't strapped for cash. My mom's an accountant, and my dad's a project manager. They're doing fine. They weren't making me pay rent because they needed the money. They were doing it to teach me responsibility. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Kylie, a 16-year-old female at the time, was out there living like a princess. Kylie has always been the golden child, straight-A student, captain of the cheer squad, everyone's favorite. My parents practically worship her. I'd like to say I stood up to my parents right then and there, but honestly, I didn't. I didn't want to cause drama or seem ungrateful. I figured, fine, I'll pay rent and hustle my way through college. I've always been independent anyway. But deep down, I was angry. Rent wasn't the only thing I had to worry about. Tuition, books, gas, groceries, it all added up. I started picking up extra shifts at the cafe, sometimes working late into the night. On top of that, I took on small baking gigs, making cupcakes and cookies for events. It felt like I was constantly working, but no matter how much I made, it was never enough. But I kept going so I'd be ready when school started. Moving out crossed my mind more times than I can count. I even started looking at apartments near campus, but rent in my area is insane. Like, how do people afford this? Every place I looked at was way out of my budget, even if I got roommates. I realized pretty quickly that moving out wasn't an option, not yet anyway, so I made a deal with myself. I'd stick it out at home until I graduated. I'd keep my head down, save as much as I could, and the second I had enough money, I'd cut them off completely. That became my motivation. Every late-night shift, every dollar saved, every skipped outing with friends, it was all part of my plan to get out and never look back. But sticking around wasn't easy. Mom and Dad didn't make it any better. They started asking for rent before I even started my classes. They'd constantly remind me about my rent due date, even if I was just a day or two away from paying. It wasn't like I was late or anything, they just liked to hang it over my head. Meanwhile, they were showering Kylie with gifts like it was Christmas every week. One time, they took her shopping for a new cheer uniform and ended up buying her an entire wardrobe. She came home with bags of clothes, shoes, and accessories, grinning from ear to ear. I asked Mom if they could at least help me with my textbooks for the semester, as it was starting very soon. She just looked at me and said, "Ellie, you need to learn to budget better. Kylie doesn't have these kinds of expenses." That stung. It wasn't just about the money. It was about how little they seemed to care about what I was going through. Kylie didn't make things any easier. She's not a bad person, but she's definitely spoiled. She'd brag about her new stuff or complain about how hard cheer practice was while I was running on 3 hours of sleep, trying to juggle work and save up for school. One night, I came home after a double shift, completely exhausted, and found her lounging on the couch with her new AirPods. "Oh, Mom and Dad got these for me," she said casually, like it was no big deal. "You should get some too, they're amazing." I just looked at her and said, "Yeah, maybe when I don't have to pay rent." She rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling through TikTok. There were moments when I wanted to scream, to tell my parents how unfair it all was, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. They had their golden child, and I was just the one paying rent. So I kept my mouth shut and focused on my plan to get out. College was supposed to be this exciting new chapter in my life, but honestly, it just felt like survival mode from the start. I thought I'd have time to find my footing, figure out a rhythm, and maybe even enjoy myself a little. But nope. Between school, work, and my parents constantly breathing down my neck about rent, I was running on empty pretty much 24/7. I was up at 6 a.m. every day, out the door by 7, and at my community college for morning classes. I'd try to get some studying in between lectures, but by the time noon rolled around, I'd be rushing to my shift at the cafe. Most days I'd work until 9 or 10 p.m., go home and collapse into bed. And on weekends, forget relaxing. That's when I'd be baking for small catering orders because, surprise, working part-time wasn't cutting it. I'd like to say I was handling it all like a pro, but that would be a lie. The cafe was chaos most of the time. We were always short-staffed, and the pandemic had made people extra impatient. So, every shift felt like a marathon. I'd be behind the counter making lattes, then running to the drive-thru, then dealing with Karen number 87, who thought her coffee wasn't hot enough, all while knowing I still had a pile of assignments waiting for me at home. To make it worse, my parents were absolutely no help. They saw me dragging myself home late at night, but instead of offering support, they'd hit me with, "Don't forget, your rent's due Friday," or, "We noticed the electricity bill went up. Are you leaving your light on?" I wanted to scream every time. And of course, while I was killing myself to make ends meet, Kylie had zero responsibilities, no job, and all the time in the world for cheer practice, hanging out with her friends or scrolling TikTok for hours. I'd come home and find her sitting on the couch with her favorite snacks, watching whatever new Netflix show she was obsessed with, while Mom made her a smoothie to keep her energy up. It was like living in two different worlds under the same roof. The financial stress was unreal. Rent wasn't outrageous compared to what I'd pay if I moved out, but it still felt like a slap in the face to be paying for the privilege of living in my own house. Add other costs into the mix, and I was constantly broke. There were weeks when I'd open my bank app and just stare at the balance, wondering how I was going to stretch $42 until my next paycheck. And asking for help? Forget it. One time, I tried asking Mom if she could cover groceries for a week because I'd had to buy a $200 textbook for class. She gave me this look like I'd just asked her to refinance the house and said, "Ellie, we're already doing so much for you by letting you stay here." Letting me stay here, like I wasn't paying rent? Like I wasn't already contributing more than Kylie, who still got her allowance every month without being asked for any contribution? Not a penny? Things really hit a low point during midterms. I was drowning in assignments, barely getting any sleep, and my hours at the cafe had been cut because business was slow. I was trying to make up for the lost income with extra baking gigs, but there were only so many hours in a day. One weekend I got a huge order for a birthday party, 100 cupcakes and a custom cake. It was great money, but it also meant pulling an all-nighter to get everything done. I spent hours baking, frosting, and decorating, finishing just in time to deliver the order and head straight to class. By the time I got home that afternoon, I was completely dead on my feet. I walked into the kitchen and found Mom and Kylie baking cookies together, for fun. Kylie looked up and said, "Oh, hey Ellie, you should join us. It's so relaxing." I wanted to throw the entire tray of cookies out the window. Instead, I muttered something about being tired and went to my room. I didn't wake up until the next morning. By the end of the semester, I was completely burnt out. My grades weren't terrible, but they weren't great either. I was barely keeping my head above water, and every time I thought about how hard I was working just to scrape by, I felt this deep, simmering anger. It wasn't fair. I was doing everything I could to stand on my own 2 feet like they wanted, and they couldn't even acknowledge it. Meanwhile, Kylie was getting everything handed to her on a silver platter. I don't know how I made it through that first year. It felt like I was constantly running uphill with a backpack full of bricks, but I kept reminding myself that it wouldn't be forever. I just had to survive a little longer. What I didn't realize was that things weren't just unfair, they were straight up rigged against me. And when I finally found out the truth, it hit me like a truck. By the time Kylie hit her senior year of high school, it felt like my parents were running a full-blown campaign to crown her the family's golden child of the century. Don't get me wrong, I'd always known they favored her, but this was next-level stuff. My parents were treating Kylie's college plans like some kind of life-or-death mission. They were taking her on campus tours months in advance, turning them into mini-family vacations. Every time they came back, Kylie had a fresh haul of university merch, hoodies, water bottles, planners, like she'd already won the lottery. Meanwhile, I was just trying to survive. My budget was so tight that I was constantly behind on something. Tuition payments, books, car maintenance, you name it. I couldn't afford to take as many classes as I wanted, so my graduation timeline started to stretch out longer and longer. At this rate, I'd be lucky to graduate before Kylie. One night, Mom came into the kitchen while I was trying to study. I was already on edge because I'd just realized I'd forgotten to turn in an online assignment. Again. Without even a "how's it going," she dropped it. "We're thinking of getting Kylie a car for college." I stared at her, trying to process. "She's going to need something reliable," Mom said, as if it was the most logical thing in the world. "You know how hard it is to get around without a car. I almost laughed. You wouldn't even help me with a bus pass when I started college, and now you're buying Kylie a car? Mom gave me that look, the don't be dramatic look. Ellie, you've always been more independent. Kylie needs more support to succeed. I didn't say anything. I just went back to my notes pretending I wasn't boiling inside. But here's the thing, it wasn't just the car. That was just the cherry on top. My parents had made it clear they were going all in on Kylie's college experience, tuition covered, rent paid, monthly allowance of course. The same parents who told me I needed to learn the value of money were basically handing Kylie a blank check. It was like watching someone live out the dream you never got to have. The favoritism didn't stop there. Mom started spending hours researching dorm decor with Kylie, buying her bedding sets and matching storage bins. Dad was suddenly a tech expert, helping her pick out the perfect laptop. They even sat down to make a college prep budget, which honestly just looked like a shopping list for a spoiled teenager. I'll never forget the night they were all in the living room, huddled around the coffee table with campus brochures and spreadsheets. Kylie was showing off some Pinterest board of dorm ideas while Dad was writing things down like he was planning a corporate merger. "What's going on?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We're helping Kylie decide between schools," Mom said, barely glancing up. "It's such a big decision. We want to make sure she's prepared." Prepared, right. When Kylie started getting acceptance letters, it was like my parents had won the lottery. She got into her top choice school, and they threw her a celebratory dinner, complete with her favorite meal and a cake that said, "Congrats, Kylie," in pink frosting. I didn't even get a good job when I got into community college. During the dinner, Mom kept going on about how proud she was and how Kylie had worked so hard for this. At one point, she turned to me and said, "Ellie, you must be so proud of your sister. She's really going places." I wanted to scream. Worked hard? Kylie barely knew what hard work was. She'd been coasting through life on talent and parental favoritism while I was out here drowning in student loans and caffeine. After that, I started avoiding family dinners altogether. It was easier to focus on my own life than to watch them build Kylie's pedestal higher and higher. The final straw came a couple of weeks before Kylie's move-in day. I came home from work one night to find a shiny used SUV parked in the driveway. At first, I thought maybe one of their friends had stopped by, but then Kylie came running outside, squealing, "They got me a car!" she shouted, practically bouncing up and down. I just stood there, staring at it. Later that night, I overheard Mom and Dad talking about Kylie's monthly allowance. Apparently, they were planning to give her enough to cover groceries, gas, and a little extra for fun. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because I couldn't afford anything else. I thought about saying something, about calling them out for how unfair it all was, but what was the point? They'd just tell me the same thing they always did: Kylie needs more support, or it's not about favoritism. So I kept my mouth shut. Kylie, of course, was completely oblivious. She'd pop into my room every now and then to show me pictures of her dorm setup or talk about how excited she was to start her college journey. One time, she actually said, "Ellie, you're so lucky you got to figure out independence early. I don't know if I could handle everything you do." Lucky? She thought I was lucky? I wanted to laugh in her face, but instead I just said, "Yeah, it's been great," and went back to my homework. The favoritism wasn't bearable anymore. It was so in your face that I started questioning whether my parents even saw me as their kid or just some tenant who happened to share their DNA. I didn't talk to anyone about how I was feeling for the longest time. What was the point? My friends were supportive, but they didn't really get it, and bringing it up at home was like shouting into the void. But one night, I found myself calling Grandpa Hank. Growing up, I spent hours in his bakery, learning how to measure flour properly, crack eggs without getting shells everywhere, and make the perfect frosting swirls on cupcakes. It was his way of showing me that hard work could also be something you love. He never judged me, never pressured me to be perfect. He just let me be me. I hadn't talked to Grandpa Hank in a while. He and Grandma had been living their best lives ever since he retired a few years ago. The man spent his whole life building up his bakery business from scratch. And when he finally decided to step away, he left it in the hands of one of his longtime managers so he and Grandma could travel the world. They'd always dreamed about doing it, and once he hung up his apron, they went for it. The downside was that Grandpa wasn't exactly tech-savvy. He barely knew how to use his phone, let alone keep up with social media, so staying in touch wasn't easy. He'd send the occasional postcard or call once in a blue moon, but most of the time, I just heard about their adventures secondhand through my parents. They'd only been back for a little while when I called him that night. I guess they decided to slow down and spend more time at home. I hadn't reached out earlier because honestly, I didn't want to dump my problems on him. He was retired, happy, and finally getting to enjoy his life. The last thing I wanted was to ruin that by unloading all my drama. But that night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. When he picked up the phone, I could feel my shoulders relax a little. "Hey kiddo," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "What's going on?" I didn't hold back. I told him everything. How I was drowning in bills, how my parents were pouring all their time and money into Kylie's college plans while making me pay rent. I ranted about the car they'd bought her, the allowance they were planning to give her, and how I was left struggling just to keep up with school. Grandpa listened quietly, letting me get it all out. I could hear him making little noises of acknowledgement every now and then, like he was piecing something together in his head. Then, out of nowhere, he interrupted me. "Ellie," he said slowly, "didn't your parents use the money I gave them for your education?" I blinked. "What money?" There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It wasn't angry, not yet, but there was something sharp about it, like he was trying to stay calm. "When you were 16, your grandmother and I put aside $50,000 for your college fund. We gave it to your parents because they said they'd use it to pay for your tuition and expenses. Are you telling me they never mentioned it to you?" I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "They never said anything," I said, my voice shaky. "I've been paying for everything myself, all of it." Grandpa let out a heavy sigh, the kind that felt like it carried years of disappointment. "Ellie, that money was for you. We gave it to them because we wanted to make sure you had a solid start so you wouldn't have to struggle. If I'd known this is what they were doing." He trailed off, but I could hear the anger creeping into his tone. It took me a minute to process what he was saying. All this time, I'd been told that my parents couldn't afford to help me and wanted me to learn independence the hard way. But now I was finding out they'd had $50,000 specifically meant for me, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me about it. They lied to me. "Ellie," Grandpa said finally, "they lied to you. That money was yours. Not theirs, not Kylie's. Yours." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to cry, but mostly I just felt numb. The past few years of scraping by, working myself to the bone, and falling behind in school all suddenly felt so much heavier. "What do you think they did with it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Grandpa said, and for the first time I could hear real anger in his voice. "But I'm going to find out." There was a long pause, and then he added, "Ellie, you're not alone in this. I'll handle it. You just focus on school, okay?" Hearing him say that made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. For years, I'd been carrying everything on my own, thinking no one cared or even noticed. But now, for the first time, I felt like someone was in my corner. "Thanks, Grandpa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Anytime, kiddo," he said. "And Ellie, don't let this crush you. You're stronger than they give you credit for." After we hung up, the anger started to creep in, replacing the numbness. How could my parents do this to me? How could they take something that was meant to make my life easier and keep it from me, knowing full well how much I was struggling? It wasn't just about the money, it was the fact that they'd chosen to let me suffer while putting Kylie on a pedestal. They'd lied to Grandpa, stolen from me, and then had the audacity to act like I should be grateful for the scraps they gave me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept going back to all the times I'd asked for help, just a little, just enough to get by, and they brushed me off. The times Mom told me I needed to budget better while they were out buying Kylie a new phone or booking her another campus visit. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, working late nights, skipping meals, delaying graduation because I didn't think there was any other option. And the whole time, they had $50,000 sitting in their pocket that could have changed everything. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. But there was also a part of me that felt something else, hope. Grandpa wasn't the kind of person to make empty promises. If he said he was going to handle it, I believed him. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this mess. That thought didn't erase the hurt, but it gave me something to hold on to. A few days after my first conversation with Grandpa Hank, my phone lit up with his name. "I talked to your parents," he said, not even bothering with a hello. "Ellie, you're not going to believe the excuses they gave me." I braced myself. "What did they say?" "They told me they used the $50,000 your grandmother and I gave them for family expenses," he said, his voice sharp. When I pressed them on what exactly that meant, your mother admitted they'd been saving it for Kylie's college instead. I felt my stomach drop. $50,000. That was more than enough to cover my tuition, rent, and every expense I'd been killing myself to pay off for years. And they'd taken all of it to make sure Kylie had a perfect, stress-free college experience. "They had no right," Grandpa continued, practically seething. "That money was for you. I made it clear that they need to repay it, every last cent. And if they don't, they're out of the will." "I can't stay here anymore, Grandpa," I said suddenly. "I can't look at them knowing what they did." "Then don't," he said immediately. "There's a guest room here with your name on it. Pack your things and come over tonight." Moving out of my parents' house was the easiest decision I'd ever made. I didn't even bother telling them I was leaving. I just started packing my bags as soon as I hung up with Grandpa. Kylie walked past my room at one point, raising an eyebrow when she saw the mess. "What's going on?" she asked, completely oblivious to everything that had been happening. "I'm moving out," I said shortly, throwing another pile of clothes into a suitcase. She blinked. "Wait, what? Why?" "Ask Mom and Dad," I said, zipping up the suitcase. I didn't owe her an explanation. I didn't see my parents that night, they were both out. I left a short note on the kitchen counter that just said, "I'm moving in with Grandpa, don't call me," and then I was gone. When I got to Grandpa's house, he was waiting for me at the door. "Come on in, kiddo," he said, pulling me into a hug. "This is where you belong." The guest room was cozy, with a big bed and a window that overlooked Grandpa's garden. It already felt more like home than my parents' house ever had. That night, for the first time in years, I went to bed without feeling like the weight of the world was crushing me. But of course, the peace didn't last long. The next morning, the calls started. Mom was the first. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail that was so dramatic it almost made me laugh. "Ellie, how could you just leave like this? Do you have any idea how this makes us look? You're overreacting. Come home so we can talk this out." "Yeah, no thanks." Then Dad called. He was a little less theatrical, but still just as frustrating. "Ellie, we know you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle things. We're family. We can work through this together." Sure, now they wanted to work through things. Where was that energy when I was drowning in bills and begging for help? By the end of the day, I'd ignored a dozen calls and texts from both of them. The messages were a mix of emotions. One minute they were apologizing, the next they were blaming me for turning Grandpa against them. One text from Mom stood out. "Ellie, you don't understand how hard this has been for us. We were just trying to do what was best for everyone. Can't you see that?" I stared at it for a long time before finally replying, "No, Mom, you weren't trying to do what was best for everyone. You were doing what was best for Kylie, and you didn't care who you hurt in the process." Her response came almost immediately. "That's not fair. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you could handle it because you've always been so strong." There it was again, that same tired excuse. I didn't even bother replying. The next day, they started showing up at Grandpa's house. I was sitting at the kitchen table, helping him sort through some bakery paperwork, when I saw Mom's car pull into the driveway. I groaned. "They're here!" Grandpa didn't look surprised. "Let me handle this," he said, standing up and heading to the door. I stayed in the kitchen, but I could hear everything. Mom was already in full meltdown mode when Grandpa opened the door. "Hank, we need to talk to Ellie," she said. "She's being completely unreasonable about this whole situation." Grandpa didn't let her in. "You mean the situation where you stole $50,000 from her?" "I think she's being perfectly reasonable," Mom sputtered, trying to defend herself. "We didn't steal it. It was for the family." "You thought wrong," Grandma interrupted. "That money was for Ellie, and you knew it. You made her struggle while you pampered Kylie. You don't get to waltz in here and act like the victim." I wanted to cheer. Mom tried again, "But Hank, we were just trying to—" Grandpa cut her off. "If you're not here to apologize, you can leave. Ellie deserves better than this, and I'm not going to stand by while you try to guilt her into forgiving you." There was a long silence, and then I heard the sound of Mom's car door slamming. She didn't even make it into the house. Once Grandpa demanded they repay the $50,000 they'd stolen from me, Mom and Dad's entire operation fell apart. They'd been coasting along like nothing was wrong, but Grandpa wasn't playing around. He gave them a deadline, and when they realized he wasn't bluffing, the panic must have set in. He made it clear they needed to pay back every single cent or they'd lose their place in the will. The fallout hit Kylie almost immediately. Mom and Dad had been cushioning Kylie's transition to college as much as humanly possible. She was living in a dorm like every other freshman, but they'd gone above and beyond to make it feel like home. Kylie had everything: a mini fridge, a high-end coffee maker, matching decor, and even some pricey electronics to help her focus. She never had to think about budgeting or work. Her only responsibility was to enjoy the college experience. Well, not anymore. With $50,000 to repay, Mom and Dad had to tighten the purse strings. Kylie's weekly care packages? Gone. The spending money they were planning to send her? Canceled. Even some of the fancy extras in her dorm had to be returned. Suddenly, Kylie wasn't just another spoiled golden child. She was a college student like the rest of us. The best part? She had to get a part-time job. I found out through Instagram, of course. Kylie posted a selfie in the mirror of some boutique with a caption that read, "First day, working girl, LOL. New adventures." I couldn't help but laugh. She made it sound like it was some cute little hobby, but I knew her well enough to know she was miserable. It didn't take long for Kylie to crack. One night she called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Ellie," she wailed, "everything's ruined." I took a deep breath. "What's ruined, Kylie?" "My life," she cried. "Mom and Dad aren't sending me any more money. They said they can't afford it, and now I have to work and budget and—" She broke off into another round of sobbing. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Kylie, welcome to the real world. You're finally experiencing what the rest of us deal with every day. She didn't appreciate that. This is all your fault, she snapped, her voice sharp with anger. If you hadn't told Grandpa, none of this would have happened. That made me laugh. Oh, I'm sorry, did I ruin your little bubble of privilege? Because as far as I'm concerned, you're just catching up to what I've been dealing with for years. Kylie started to say something else, but I wasn't in the mood to argue. Look, I said, cutting her off, if you want someone to blame, talk to Mom and Dad. They're the ones who stole from me to fund your perfect little life. She hung up on me after that, which honestly saved me the trouble. The weeks that followed were almost entertaining. Kylie started posting cryptic updates on social media about how hard life was and how she felt betrayed by the people she trusted most. It was laughable, considering she'd spent her entire life being pampered and shielded from reality. Now that she had to face even a fraction of the challenges I'd been dealing with, she acted like the world was ending. One post stood out to me, a picture of her dorm desk with a cup of instant noodles and a caption that read, "College life, it's not as glamorous as it seems." I stared at it for a while, debating whether to comment. I wanted to say something like, "You've been living this way for 2 weeks. Try doing it for years." But I stopped myself. What was the point? Kylie would never understand. Still, her pity party didn't go unnoticed. Her friends and followers flooded her comments with messages of support, saying things like, "Stay strong, Kylie," and "You've got this," as if getting a part-time job and budgeting was some insurmountable challenge. From what I heard through the family grapevine, Kylie wasn't adjusting well to her new reality. She complained to anyone who would listen about how unfair it all was, but the sympathy wasn't as strong as she probably hoped. Most people were too busy with their own problems to care about hers. Mom and Dad tried to soften the blow, of course. They sent her a couple of care packages, nowhere near as extravagant as before, but still enough to remind Kylie that she was the favorite. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. For years, they told me that struggling was good for me, that it would make me stronger. Now that Kylie was struggling, they were bending over backward to make sure she didn't fall apart completely. But even with their help, Kylie wasn't thriving. She was surviving, sure, but that was it. Her grades started slipping, she had trouble keeping up with her job, and the cracks in her perfect facade were starting to show. And honestly, I didn't feel bad for her. Meanwhile, Grandpa didn't just give me a place to stay, he made sure I had everything I needed to get back on track. He helped me organize my finances, encouraged me to take on a full course load to finish college sooner, and even got me involved in his bakery's operations. It felt good to be around someone who actually cared about my future. As for my parents, they kept trying to reach out. At first, it was constant. Mom left voicemail after voicemail, her tone switching between guilt trips and apologies. "Ellie, we're sorry, okay? We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. We love you." Sure, they loved me, just not enough to treat me fairly when it mattered. Dad's messages were more subdued but just as frustrating. "Ellie, we know you're upset, but you've got to see it from our side. We were trying to do what was best for the family, and now this family needs you. Please come home." I didn't respond to any of them. What was there to say? They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry they'd been caught, and they only wanted me back to exploit me one more time. Eventually, the calls slowed down. I think they realized I wasn't going to forgive them just because they wanted me to. Shortly before I officially graduated, Grandpa sat me down in the kitchen. "Ellie," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "I've been thinking about the future of the bakery." I opened the folder and found a stack of papers detailing the business's operations. Grandpa smiled at me, his eyes crinkling the way they always did when he was proud. "You've been helping out a lot, and I can see how much you care about this place. I want you to take over when you're ready." I stared at him, completely stunned. "Grandpa, are you serious?" "Of course I'm serious," he said. "You've earned this, Ellie, and I know you'll make it even better." Hearing that from him meant everything. For so long I'd felt like my hard work didn't matter, like no one saw how much I was struggling. But Grandpa did, he always had. Taking over the bakery became my focus after that. I threw myself into learning everything I could about the business, from managing staff to balancing budgets. Grandpa was right there with me, guiding me through every step. By the time I graduated, I was ready to take the reins. Grandpa officially handed over the business, and we celebrated with a big party at the bakery. Friends, staff, and even some of my professors showed up to congratulate me. These days, I don't talk to my parents much. They're still trying to patch things up, acting like a few apologies will magically fix everything. What they don't realize is that Grandpa already removed them from the will months ago. They're probably still clinging to the hope that they can weasel their way back in. But honestly, it's not my problem. I'm too busy running the bakery and building something real for myself. If they want to waste their time, that's on them. Let them watch from the sidelines. I'm moving forward, and I'm not looking back.